Well, it's hard for me to say this because I don't really know myself. I've finally come to the conclusion that small boys get interested in subjects the way they catch cold. Nobody knows how or why, they just do.
When you were 10 years old, you managed to persuade your parents to take you across the Atlantic on the Titanic sister ship, the Olympic. How did you manage to persuade them? What did you say to them?
I don't really remember the words that I used or what I said, but I was already interested in the Titanic and knew, of course, that the Olympic was the Titanic sister ship, and we had been abroad before, and I was already in love with ships, and asked them, knowing the Titanic and the Olympics relationship, just that it would be fun to go on the Olympic.
And no objection, you went?
No objection, we went, that's right.
There's been talk of raising the Titanic from the ocean floor. Do you think that'll ever happen?
I can't see it ever happening myself, famous last words, but she's down some 12,000 feet, and that's beyond ordinary salvage equipment as we know it today to do anything. And it seems to me that the investment that would be necessary to develop a technique for raising her would be far more than anybody would like to spend. Certainly, technically, I suppose it would be possible to do a lot of salvage work. Any people who can get to the moon ought to be able to get to the bottom of the ocean. But there comes the question of whether it is really worth the amount of money that would have to be spent.
But aren't there marvelous tales of huge treasures, of large diamonds and coin boxes and whatever left at the bottom of the sea?
Yes, there are any number of tales, and I imagine the value of the cargo has grown with every year since she went down. The cargo, as far as I could ascertain at the time that she was carrying at the time she sank, didn't have anything all that valuable on board. I've never seen a cargo manifest, and I don't know anybody else who's ever seen one. But there were certainly stories of the cargo that she was carrying that came out at the time. And the cargo wasn't all that interesting. It was only much later that stories of Egyptian mummies and fabulous treasure evolved, and I've never been able to trace the source of those stories.
This was very much a tragedy for the city of Southampton, who boasted that they could put the best sailors afloat onto the best ship afloat. What was the feeling in Southampton at the time when they first learned of the sinking?
Oh, just black distress. There were streets in Southampton where every other family lost somebody, either in the family or very dear to them. It was an appalling thing for that city in particular.
Presumably there are still some unanswered questions about the disaster. Which question most fascinates you at this point?
Well, I think of the questions that I really puzzle over, the question of one of the lifeboats, it was Boat 1, why it was lowered with only 12 or 14 people on that night when there weren't enough lifeboats if you would fill them all to capacity. I've never really understood why that lifeboat was lowered almost, figuratively speaking, empty.
How many could it have taken?
It could have taken 40 people, and it was lowered at a time when the plight of the ship was desperate, and obviously so.
And no possible answers to that? No sorts of clues?
I've never been able to find an answer. There were charges made, which I do not believe, that the passengers in the boat, and there were only 5, persuaded the crew to lower it with them with the promise of greater things later. But I don't believe this for a moment. I don't understand whether it was whether the ship's the personnel lowering the boat were so anxious to get it away that they didn't even wait and look around. I've never understood. I would love to know. I wish if I could be reincarnated sometime in the past instead of in the future, that I could have been on the deck and known why that lifeboat was lowered that way.